We need Paul, I think, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Tim's optional, but
Well,
Hey, everyone.
all right, we will, we're back from recess. We'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item on our agenda tonight is our program review of our QComp. We've got Ms. Gibbs and Ms. Menz. I believe they're going to be joining us via
Satellite.
satellite.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
Are you at
excellent.
the space station?
What was that?
Are you at the International Space Station?
I feel like that. Very interesting, and I'm used to the Google Meet setup. So Matt, do I share my screen or are you sharing it?
you can share your screen. I just gave you the option to share your screen at the bottom.
There it is. Okay.
Your screen.
All right. So, and I believe I'm solo. Maria is on vacation and I told her I could manage on my own. So I'm hoping she doesn't join us because that would mean she's pausing in her time away. So it's just me tonight, but I appreciate the board and Superintendent Shane, as always, having us here to provide the overview and your continued support for our QComp program. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. I believe Matt shared kind of these presentation notes ahead of time. Our QComp leadership team continues to be Maria and I at the district level. Monica Kunkel and Shalyn Torter are our 7 through 12 advisors. And both Jessica and Meredith team on the intermediate and elementary school, and they actually were up for kind of their term was up and we posted it and no one contested them. So they will continue to resume their advisory roles for the next few years. And there's our mission statement, which really focuses on QComp being a teacher-led program. Its purpose creating, opportunities for educators to learn, continue to grow professionally, while also helping students reach their full potential and achieve academic excellence. Our goals for this year all were in reading once again. The district and high school goals, because they are tied to MCA, are embargoed. I think it's even August now that they've pushed it back to. The intermediate and elementary schools goals are tied to FAST. So those have actually been already released. And I believe the intermediate school did meet their goal. Elementary did not. So we were able to assess that already with those being FAST tests. Elementary highlights. It was a very different year. Obviously, because of the nature of the pandemic, our groups met, but they met, the same as we are meeting right now via Google Meets. And so while we were glad we had that set up and that the groups can continue, it obviously was a different type of meeting, but we had some highlights in each of our buildings. The elementary school listed some overall highlights. They continue to build on relationships, also looking at aligning common assessments, including just looking at the benchmarks and how that applied to their new curriculum. They also were focused on increasing student engagement, as well as social emotional learning, self-regulation, CELS. We had a workshop at the beginning of the school year that was tied to that and building on some of those strategies. Incorporating technology. I know they spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year getting those kiddos ready for when they would need to utilize their computers in a distant situation. And so focused on how to best do that, as well as we had our teachers teaching using the computer continually as their source of curriculum and looking to each other to help build on that. And then moving to more standards-based reporting. As far as our continuation of what we had looked at the previous year with our literacy initiative, They continued to look at writing high quality learning targets. When lesson planning, looking at that plan, do, reflect, process, building on those interactive word walls. And then Dr. Bonnie Hoke had done a wonderful presentation in February prior to everything changing in our worlds on culturally relevant books and expanding classroom libraries to tie to that. And so they continued the work on that as well. As far as the intermediate highlights went, they looked at the RACE strategy, which is a reading strategy where you restate the question, answer, and then using textual evidence to support. Organize and build multicultural classroom libraries, looking at the vocabulary and expanding their word walls. Also needing to incorporate that technology piece. And working with students to self-select books at their interest in reading level. And then once again, tied to the literacy initiative we had already started and just building off of that culturally responsive literacy funded approach, quality learning targets. And then in their secondary groups, they actually worked on multicultural book talks. And I have a link to their presentation, their kind of final piece at the end of the year. If you have a chance to look at it, to see each teacher chose a multicultural book to highlight, and that is a part of that whole presentation. And then just building advisors and LPCs were registered for a virtual dyslexia conference. And the nice thing about that, it was actually supposed to occur the last Friday of our school week. But once you signed up for that, you have access to some presentations and material. And so they were going to work over the summer looking at that and then building on that next year. And then finally, secondary highlights, collaborative group goals, literacy and student engagement, looking at the critical thinking piece, also building on that SEL, social emotional learning. Our math group, we had one math group in particular looking at how literacy applied, particularly through word problems. And then instruction assessment using technology. And with the 7 through 12 teachers, that became a necessity as we all had students in front of us and had students learning from home at the same time, and how to make sure our assessments were aligned. And then as well as the literacy initiative, continuing those learning targets, working on the gradual release of responsibility and how that worked in our multi-mode learning models. We had a couple of groups looking at reading reconsidered, which built on the RACE technique I had referred to earlier, and just looking at text-dependent questions to get students to think deeper in their reflection of what they read. And then educational equity, assessment practices and various learning models, which took a lot of time and discussion looking at how do we make sure our assessments are strong, and how do we make sure that the students at home we're assessing what they're learning in the same way we're assessing it, the students in front of us, and just a lot of discussion around that piece. Overcoming technology barriers for those at-home learners. And then just how do we recognize those at-risk students, and how do we make sure that we address their needs and find time to work with them and make sure that they're meeting their standards. So those were the highlights from the building levels. Kind of overall as a district, at the beginning of the year, we knew that we were going to look at a unique situation and that we needed really to give teachers time to adjust and reflect and figure out where those learning needs were. And so we, as a literacy leadership team, decided to pause any new district-wide literacy initiative. So we were going to continue to look at what we had done that first year, but also give teachers time to address the new needs that were in front of us. Continue to discuss and modify current literacy practices, as I mentioned, with the learning targets, teacher clarity, text selection, where we saw the new discussion and where many of us, myself included, grew was just adapting to the learning model changes and becoming more aware of what technology we could use to better address our students in those different learning models. And then our leadership team continued to meet kind of at the building level, but then as a district level, kind of assessing the situation and looking to next year and how we were going to kind of get back on track and yet learn from the experience of this year as well. And so that kind of takes us to our literacy and learning journey 2021 to 22, what we've got planned. We, in those meetings, those leadership meetings, we came to the conclusion that we couldn't do just a one size fits all approach, that there were some needs that were unique to each of the buildings, and that we wanted to make sure that all teachers were feeling like their needs were met. And so while we are going to be doing some district-wide pieces, we're also going to be differentiating within the buildings. So district-wide, we are using Solution Tree, which is a nationally recognized educational company, and they are going to be coming in and doing some training with our lead peer coaches in August, as well as our leadership team and administrators. And then they're going to be back at the beginning of workshop week to do a PLC reboot and really focusing on making our collaborative group strong. And so I believe they are also coming back then mid-year, but in between that, then looking at those building needs. And so we've got Dr. Jennifer McCarthy coming in, Plucker coming in. She is a local literacy specialist. A handful of us met with her last week, and she's going to address some pieces. Some of it will be for 12, some of it's going to be for 6, pre-K through 6. Those are her workshops listed there. We've got continued benchmark training with our K through 4 group. Because of the pandemic, we had a little bit of a pause in that training that they were supposed to receive. So there's some carryover from that will be worked at the beginning of the year. And then also they wanted some literacy foundations and dyslexia training. And so they will be looking at that as well. And just even at the building levels, administrators coming in and just meeting the needs of our teachers, really providing that continued time to look at where our students are, and where we need to address some of those learning gaps as a result of the last year and a half. So that's kind of where we're at in a nutshell. I kind of sped through that a little quickly. So any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer.
Questions for me? Anybody else?
I guess my one question, Megan, is do you see maybe some of the virtual aspects continue for just ease of meeting, maybe in some of your PLC situations? Does that afford you some different flexibility of when you are able to meet with each other?
That's a great question. Early on in our QCOM kind of journey, we were specifically told that we could not have meetings in that fashion, that everybody had to be physically present. And then obviously when that became impossible, education, our MDE said to us, obviously this is now the new mode. And we utilized that as a way we could meet kind of when it was difficult, if we had teachers at home and obviously quarantine and couldn't come in, and just not wanting those big group gatherings. So I don't know. I think that it may be an option if we do have a teacher who is at home and can't come in. I know a lot of our teachers are ready to be back and meet in person too. So it's something that we'll have to talk about in August and kind of decide as a group is what are the parameters and check with, Minnesota education as to, is this an option that we can continue with now that we've seen it work, and obviously provide a new way of discussing and collaborating.
Any other questions?
No. I guess I just also want to express just tremendous gratitude to you, to your QComp leaders, all the teachers, staff, just once again for a less than ideal year. And, for the results that you were able to present tonight, you should be tremendously proud of what you were able to achieve. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And like I said, thank you for your continued support. I think we're so fortunate as a district to have this program in place, and it's, thanks to the board and Matt and our administrators, because it really was needed this year more than ever, just to have that opportunity to to collaborate and to brainstorm because everything was so new to us and all of us essentially were new in the process. And so it was really a vehicle that allowed us to collaborate and learn from one another at a time where we had to think quickly on our feet. And it was just good to have it established. And like I said, it's a result of a collaboration within our community and district.
Great to hear. Thanks.
All right. Am I good to go or are you, I don't want to
Thank you.
click off, but I also know you have other points on your meeting to get to. So I will thank you again and we will touch base. And I think the fall we'll be back to present more of that information as we move to vote for the program again.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. As you've all seen, we've got meeting minutes posted as well as the numerous financial affairs that we always include every month. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
Jenny, I'll make that motion.
Second. Motion by Jenny, second by Sue. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next item is our resolution for acceptance of gifts. I will read that resolution. Whereas Coca-Cola, $28.25 for Delano Elementary School, Target, $33 for Delano Elementary School, Delano Tigers Athletic Booster Club, $381.80 for girls golf reimbursements, $325.95 for boys golf reimbursements, Basketball Booster Club, $2,810.17 for boys basketball booster paid coach, Lacrosse Booster Club, $162.95 for boys lacrosse reimbursements, Basketball Booster Club, $1,303.33 for girls basketball uniforms, Eaton Hydraulics, $3,000 for robotics, Anchor Plastics, $100 for robotics, Delano Lions Club, $1,000 for robotics, and USA Football, $500 grant for community education youth sports. These items have been generously offered to donate to Delano Public Schools. Conditions of these are noted above. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Corey, second by Amy. Any discussion? As always, we thank everyone for these generous contributions. They're always so greatly needed, especially by these activities organizations. Can move to a roll call vote.
Nope. Oh, yeah.
The resolution.
Yeah.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, the resolution passes. Next item on the agenda are personnel matters, which are linked within the agenda. We've got a number of items on the personnel list tonight. A couple of retirements and resignations, some recommendations for employment, new hires, and a couple contract changes, obviously all made within the budget constraints that we have been speaking about. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's personnel matters?
Jenny, I'll make that motion. Deppick can second.
Motion by Jenny, second by Rachel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And
Any
I'm
abstentions?
I'm abstaining for perceived conflict of interest.
Thank you. All right. That motion carries. All right, check back to my agenda here. Next item, or next up, we have public comment. This is our opportunity in the meeting where school patrons are given the opportunity to address the school board regarding items not on the agenda. All patrons will be asked to state their names and address for the record. While the board appreciates feedback from the public in this forum, board members will not comment on or discuss topics brought up by speakers at this time. We've got a number of people here tonight. I'm assuming a couple of you here for public comment.
Madam Chair and members of the board, my name is Peter Deppa. I live at 524 West River Road. I am here speaking on behalf of myself, the 400 students who signed the petition for backpacks, and the students present. Around 2 months ago, I came to the board asking for guidance in order to find a resolution to the issue of the backpack ban. It was suggested that I work with Mr. Voigt and the site-based committee to come to a solution. Following the meeting, I began setting up meetings to partner with Mr. Voigt and staff to work through any issues they saw. Friday, May 7th, I met with Mr. Voigt. We discussed the ban further, including reasoning for banning. I was told that it was not an issue of security, it was a space issue. Mr. Voigt offered me an opportunity to present at the next SBLT meeting, and I accepted. As I was preparing for the meeting, I thought about the space issue that Mr. Voigt brought forward. This past year, almost every student carried a backpack with all of their supplies for the day due to hallway restrictions from COVID. Next year, without restrictions, it is unlikely that all students will carry backpacks, and even far less likely that they will continue to carry the amount of materials with them that they did this past year. Site-based meeting was Wednesday, May 12th. I had a presentation ready, but unfortunately due to a miscommunication, I was not invited to join the virtual meeting. Friday, May 14th, I was offered another opportunity to present to the staff. However, I wasn't presenting to the site-based committee who approved the handbook. I was presenting to staff who were given 2 days' notice to attend the meeting on a Friday morning. Although I received positive feedback from the staff and I appreciated their kind words of support, I was never able to present to the site-based committee as a whole, or even a majority of the committee. I later found out following this meeting, a survey of teachers was conducted. Although the survey went out to the entire staff, my presentation was only made to approximately 20 members, which is less than half of those who replied. After that, I continued to reach out to Mr. Voigt and Ms. Alblight for follow-ups on the process. May 26th, I was told by Ms. Alblight about the poll and notified that staff favored the backpack policy over eliminating backpacks. Although she wasn't able to remember the results of the poll accurately at the time, it was later confirmed to me that the results of the poll were 54.1% in favor of backpacks. So approximately 10% more of the staff was in favor than not in favor. After that, I was encouraged that staff supported my backpack proposal by about 10% when I was only able to connect with about 20 staff members. Ms. Alblight then explained to me that she was working on setting up a meeting with Mr. Voigt, herself, and 3 individuals whose names I was never told to discuss backpacks further. Ms. Alblight was very nice about giving me updates and helping me work through this process. She told me that one of the individuals said the handbook should be left alone, and 2 of the other individuals thought that this should be discussed further. That talk was the last communication I got from any admin or staff. Now, this has been a learning experience for me. I've continued forward and kept working towards a backpack policy after being told several times that the board had already voted and I should try again in 1 to 2 years. I continued forward after the student body was told through the school newspaper that the school board had already voted no. I continued forward after not being able to meet with the site-based leadership team. This is something important to me and something I feel is important to have available to students as an organizational tool and a way to help decrease the student traffic hallways during passing times. I really wanted to express my appreciation for the time that Mr. Voigt, Ms. Alblight, and the Delano High School staff that attended my presentation have given me. I feel as though I needed to come back to the board tonight before the decision was made, because although I tried and made myself available, I was ultimately unable to meet with the site-based committee to work through the backpack policy and their concerns. I want you to know that this is not me being a student who is unable to take no for an answer. I am a student who tried to work through the process, and due to circumstances beyond my control, I was unable to. Before I finish, I want to leave you with this last thought. The one thing brought up many times to me throughout this was that students would have access to laptop bags or sleeves of some sort, but backpacks would be banned. This is classified as a laptop sleeve, and this is considered a backpack. These are literally the same thing. The only difference is the name. I just cannot understand why this one thing is being banned, but this one's completely fine. I want to thank you for your time and encourage you to vote in favor of allowing students to carry backpacks. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, Paul, you mentioned that there was somebody who emailed one.
This message was submitted by Wendy Town of Delano. She wasn't able to be here tonight, but she asked that we read the message for the record. It says, in May, the governor issued a proclamation late in the evening that impacted school-age students by creating a situation where parents were not given the opportunity to be parents and have important conversations with our children before action was taken during the school day. Earlier this year, with the possibility of a walkout, we parents received advance notice and were given the opportunity to have a conversation with our kids. I want our district to know that as a parent, I want the opportunity to have those conversations first. Regardless of any decision or proclamation from the governor or any government official, let us parents be the parents and keep the politics out of our school. I would like the district to do the following. Number one, teach our students how to think, not what to think. Number two, foster an environment where students can think for themselves and practice their critical thinking skills. Number three, protect students from being influenced or indoctrinated to think a certain way. Number four, ensure students receive classroom instruction that is factual and objective. Number five, support teachers who serve as facilitators of classroom discussion and learning without making students feel pressured to think a certain way. And number six, provide a well-rounded world-class education that exposes students to multiple viewpoints and perspectives on a wide range of topics. Over the last year, many families have discovered that there are other options for education beyond public schools, including here in Delano, and some of those families will not be returning. In my opinion, if we don't keep the politics and political policies out of our schools, we will see more families leave our district. I appreciate the recent statement from the district regarding policies for the fall, yet I'm concerned that politics may continue to interfere. Please stand up for our kids and keep the kids, not politics, in our schools. Thank you. And that's Wendy Town.
Yes, we do have one more.
I wasn't gonna speak, but I just thought about this. So I'm Cam Alapore. I live on 373 Greenway Drive. And I just came to listen originally, but I'm just thinking about this and I'm looking at what Peter showed you. And I know you can't respond to anything, so I get that. But if this is considered a computer sleeve bag and this is considered a backpack, they're the same size. And as a parent of children that go to high school and soon the intermediate schools, right? It's called intermediate. Good, that's a good parent there. You know, we asked our high school girls what they thought. And one was passionate about being able to take their bag because they had it last year. The other one was like, I can do either way. The concern I have is they're the same size, right? So if this takes up way too much space, but this somehow is not, let's be real. I mean, unless someone comes up with a duffel bag, which I understand would be a little bit bigger, letting the kids have these and giving them enough time, unless you're going to give more time in between classes to get back and forth, because if, one of them mentioned if they're at one end of the school and they have to get to the other end and they have to stop their locker and not chat, they're still going to be late. So I would ask that you reconsider your decision of banning backpacks for whatever reasons, because it worked last year. Okay, and I understand we had some kids out for doing distance learning, so the school wasn't as packed, but it wasn't like it was 40% full. Okay, we were pretty full still, and we didn't have issues, right? It didn't seem to be an issue that we heard of. So I would reconsider it as a parent, not just from Peter's standpoint as a student, but as a parent who has children that go to the school, that found it very beneficial to be able to get to class on time. Fortunately, we've got kids that really care about getting to class on time and not being late, and them being late would probably disturb them more and make them more upset, taking away that education that we give them. So I just ask that you reconsider that based on the size of the bags being the same. And by the way, this one weighs a lot more than this one does. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Brad Faulkner, I live at 638 Country Lane. I wanted to speak to that too. I'm probably one of the laziest people in town. My kid's lazy too. And we're not going to carry any more than we have to from class to class. But if I have to carry a computer and books and calculators and a tracker to class, I don't understand how it's a bigger tripping hazard in a bag or piled next to me on the floor. So if the reason behind it is a tripping hazard, it being in the way. I don't know how being in a bag versus being strewn across the floor. I guess I fail to see the logic, so. And again, boy, what a can of worms you can open there with a differentiating between a backpack and a computer sleeve. I mean, that's just gonna get the potential to have to make that decision. Just seems like a mess. So, yeah, I guess I don't get it. I'd love to see them carry their backpacks. And my kid's very worried about losing weight. He stresses about everything. So I would love to see them be able to keep their backpacks too. Thank you guys.
My name is Crystal Taves, 1453 Fifth Street Southwest, Delano. Wendy Town's email, I think, said it very well in terms of what a lot of parents have been feeling over the last number of months in our district. We have 5 kids at all of the schools here in Delano. We've had kids in Delano schools for 8 years now and have loved our schools and our teachers and our administrators. Sorry. Comes from all my love. We've had amazing experiences across all the schools, including a special needs child, an adopted minority child, boys, girls, we've kind of had it all. And this year was so disappointing. COVID was one thing, and we all knew going in that it was going to be a hard year with all the challenges and all the technology and all the constantly changing recommendations and expectations. But the lack of respect that I think parents, students, and teachers and staff felt was really disheartening. And it came in so many different ways. In the fall, it was at the intermediate school, them having the kids vote. Kids felt uncomfortable. I drove in my huge van a number of kids to school trying to help out the bus situation. And there were numerous classes represented in my car the morning after, and how uncomfortable they felt being asked to vote and vote digitally for president, something that, mind you, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders have no knowledge of. They don't understand these candidates or what it means or any of it really. Now I understand an argument was when my husband called the principal that they wanted to step it up from school lunch, which is what the elementary school votes on. And I think that that's awesome. Those kids are very excited to vote for French toast or hot dogs or whatever it is, and then have that served up the next day. At the intermediate school, if you want to take it further, great. Actually have the kids come up with a platform, have them understand what it means to have to choose something and make it happen and earn the money to fund it and all of that. But voting for president in a year like this, come on. You had teachers that said, we don't agree with this. They actually would not participate. Other teachers did. There were fistfights that broke out. Kids were being bullied in the classroom. Unacceptable. We expect better from our schools, from the leadership, which I was told it came from the top down, and the teachers. And it went on. I mean, obviously the most recent thing being the moment of silence in May and how disappointing that was that we were told less than an hour before that was happening. That's unacceptable. We expect better. We expect better. Our students felt bullied. Our teachers, I've heard a number of teachers that are extremely respected in our district that have served our students in our district for years upon years, questioning how long they can last in our schools because of the dynamics going on. That's a problem that needs to be addressed if we're going to continue to be Delano schools so desirable. And we were one of those families that made an alternative choice midway through to take some of our kids out because of what was going on for numerous different reasons at each level. It was a different reason for a different kid. And we don't hesitate for 1 second to continue alternatively, if that's what we need to do to have our kids well educated, not indoctrinated, and not bullied at school. And it is really sad knowing these teachers, and so many of them personally, from being a parent, being friends, and this year having been a substitute and coworker with them, how they're feeling just coming into school, that they feel like there's all this talk about diversity and acceptance and inclusion, yet a large number of people aren't feeling very included or accepted or respected
in our schools. And so I think going into this next year, my biggest hope is that we can get back to a place of respect for our staff, for our students, and for our parents. And that going forward, we can continue to build on what was Delano before this last year and make sure that these political and social issues that are causing some of this bullying and harassment in our schools is left out of it. And if things are coming from the top down, we need to be notified a lot more than an hour before it happens. Thank you.
I'm Willie Sorensen. I live on 301 Forest Street Southwest. I wanted to make this kind of short. It's just, I mean, the backpack thing, obviously, which was a major thing in this meeting tonight. I think that, well, number one, I think that students should keep backpacks too, because it's more efficient in general. But I also want to talk about like the locker room, the locker standpoint on it. Like, I mean, if we're gonna end up not keeping backpacks, then we need to figure out something with locker wise too. Because if kids are going from one end to the other, like for example, like my grade, like it's in the middle of the hallways, obviously, like it's in the kind of in the middle. But we got classes like the East Wing, the West Wing that are way up there. And students have problems getting up there and getting back sometimes as well. Especially that last year was a 4-minute thing, which I don't know if we're doing like 10 minutes next year or 4 minutes. But last year, the time period that we had in general was really like what it was really vast, and it wasn't that much at all. And I just think that if we're gonna make this kind of remediation, I definitely think we should think it over again, but I think that we need to think the locker situation as well. Thank you.
We're gonna try this. You're my soul sister. I cry every time I come up here. I'm Shadow Falknor. I live at 638 Country Lane. I am a concerned parent of a freshman who's going to be a sophomore this year. With the changes that are being talked about with our kids, but not to us, about schedule changes and how this is going to affect them. And the kiddos, like my child, who are pushing themselves so hard because they want to excel and want to be well prepared for college and be able to take CIS classes, and to hear that they may be taken away and we have no knowledge. We've been left questioning and asking and hearing nothing. There's nothing on the websites, there's nothing anywhere. We need help again to strengthen our students, to be the parents and know what's going on.
Thanks, everybody, for your voices tonight. Always appreciated. The handbook is on the agenda for this evening. Discussion during that, we can certainly talk about anything we want related to that at that point in the agenda. To the last speaker there, I will say that there has been quite a few communications from Barry recently about some sessions that he's having to educate and gather feedback on potential schedule changes. Sure, they won't be the last ones. So it's by no means done. I think he's very early in that. So I just wanted to just briefly address that. I think a lot of the speculation that you alluded to is purely speculation at this point, and there's a whole process that has to happen in order for a decision to be made. And I attended one of those. There was 2 other people there. So I know that it's tough time of this, in the middle of the summer to have these, but I think that Barry is trying to be pretty collaborative with it this year. So let that process play out. And I hope all of your voices are heard in that process. That's his intent, is to get those voices heard. So, and then I guess that's probably a good summary of where we were at for that stuff. So unless there are any others, we'll move on with the agenda. Thanks, everybody, for your comments. We'll move on to administrative reports, starting with Superintendent Shane.
There is a reason why I'm again standing here. I want to first and foremost, at the end of the school year, we take the time, both as a staff and as a district, to recognize work that people have done. And one of those categories is in the area of years of service. And at this particular time, I would like to recognize Lisa Seguin, who is going to receive an application for her years of service on the board at 10 years. So congratulations, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I'll be brief with the rest of my comments, and I'll share them here. First of all, we did have about its most successful closure to an extremely challenging year in so many different ways. And I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've never counted down the days. This year I did. And for many reasons, wanted to make sure that we move forward and we move on from where we are within the certain situations that we had to deal with in this year. Thus then, moving forward, I had a great exercise that I facilitated with my leadership team. We were in the Tiger Den of the high school, and we put on the whiteboard, we have big walls, 2 conjoining walls. And we had every member of the leadership team write down all the things that they learned this year through these unusual circumstances that potentially to carry forward, to learn, to make us better, whatever that may be. So we did that. And then they each listed their top 3. And then on the other board, they listed their top 3 of things that they will never, ever want to do again. And that we did a ceremonial, we listed them all on the whiteboard, and we did a ceremonial wiping them away. And our intent as a district to move forward is to get back to as much normal as we humanly possibly can, because that's what we do, and we do it very, very well. So hopefully, and I sent out a note to all parents and staff members here to clarify a few things. We are not going to be following any kind of requirement that is not legally mandated of us. We are going to, if we have decision-making at the local level, those decisions will come to the board with a recommendation from the administration. But it is, and our intent is to bring back years of normalcy in how we conduct teaching and learning in our classrooms, how we conduct educational excellence and systemic educational excellence throughout our entire system. It is important to note that I have not received guidance from the state agencies regarding the 2021-22 school year. But I wanted to make sure that our intention is always very clear, is to get back to normal. That's the most important piece that we can do. If we do that safely, we are going to be doing that. One of the examples is I'm making a recommendation for the board to rescind the policy that requires masks in our schools. It is no longer a requirement in our schools currently right now. So with that said, that concludes my remarks for this evening. I would entertain any questions that the board may have. Otherwise, we can go to our other administrative reports.
No questions, just thanks again. I know this has been a tough year for everybody, and thanks for taking a lot of the heat.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, we have principals on our agenda, including welcoming 2 new principals this evening, which I'm very excited about. First on the agenda is Miss Katie Thompson.
Well, I'll keep this short because I don't actually work here yet. But I'm very excited to be starting on Thursday, July 1st. I'll be setting up shop in the intermediate school. Just want to thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here. Lived in Delano for 11 years now. My boys go to school here, so I'm really excited to be a part of that community. Trying to really sift through all of the nuts and bolts, and trying to focus in July primarily on learning about the school, learning about where it's been, where we're trying to go, considering the challenging years that we've had. And also I'm building relationships with staff and parents and community. So starting in July, we'll start bringing staff in and having some one-on-ones and meeting with them. So I'm excited for that. And it's been really great to hear from parents, and I've sat in a lot of school board meetings. There's not a lot of public comment. This is my first Delano school board meeting, but it's hard and it's challenging, but the fact that you have community members willing to come in and speak for the school, I think is really great. So I'm really looking forward to, intermediate school is still relatively a baby school. And I was just talking to staff person today about how excited I am, what potential I see. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really excited about it. If you have any questions, I'll sure answer them now if you'd like.
Welcome.
Welcome. We're
Yeah.
very excited to have you here. Thanks very much for coming in tonight, introducing yourself. We're looking forward to
It's a 5-minute drive now. That's easy.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Barry Voigt. Hi, Barry.
Good evening, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board. It's a pleasure to speak with you on behalf of the high school this evening. First, and I'll keep it brief as well. I really only have 3 items. I'm happy to report that all of our staffing is complete at the high school for next school year. We do have some paraprofessionals potentially to hire, but we always wait over the summer months to see how our needs change before we progress with that in August. But very happy to report that all of our teaching staff is in place for next school year. The next thing I want to discuss with you is just some work that we've been doing behind the scenes with an advisory task force. Actually, Laura Voigt is spearheading this effort and partnering with a variety of staff members from around the building to really improve and embolden our advisory program. Advisory, like many other things that are normal in our high school, had a pandemic pause. And now that obviously we want to get back to normal next school year, we want to bring it back so that it's better than it was before. And there's 3 main goals that we're trying to achieve for the task force. One is that we really want a more cohesive college and career exploration process. We want to also continually improve our 7 through 12 school climate. And then finally, work in some social emotional learning curriculum and executive functioning skills. And we're going to do that through our use of Naviance. So Naviance is an online portfolio tool that a lot of students use specifically for college and career planning. But there's some whole curricular elements in there that we think will be useful as well, particularly for the younger students. So ultimately, we're going to have a more cohesive scope and sequence and really kind of bring in and improve those areas that aren't addressed in the other core curriculum areas. And the last thing that I want to discuss with you is our scheduling redesign task force. And it was mentioned, of course, in our public comment. We are very, very early in this process. In fact, I've shared with the parents and students and staff who have attended listening sessions already that there is no timetable. Our timetable is we'll finish when we finish. It's more important that we do this process thoroughly and deliberately and intently. So we're not going to try to force anything to get it done before we're ready to be done. The listening sessions that I have had thus far have been sparsely attended, understandably so because of the summertime. But we did want to at least get the ball rolling a little bit. And I do promise that there will be many, many more opportunities for student and parent and staff and community input. Just had the 3 listening sessions with students and parents, 1 with staff, and then our task force this summer is going to be doing some kind of research and development, just looking at what other schedules are out there for different schools and things like that. And I can promise that while it's early and we haven't had a real broad participation yet, but the continuation of CIS and AP classes, some of our high academic opportunities, is certainly at the top of our goal list. So there is no intent in any way, shape, or form to eliminate any opportunities in that regard. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I guess my one question is, are you going to house or have a repository for different research elements or listening sessions or notes or videos? Is that going to exist on the district website or the high school? Are you thinking about how you're going to make that information available to people?
Sure. We don't yet have any plans for how to make that publicly available to all the community. We do have all of our resources right now, and they're minimal because we've just started, but they are on a shared drive that all of our staff have access to. As we get into the process and are a little bit more developed in our scope and sequence of work, if you will, we can certainly explore different ways to make that publicly available. And it will be, just as I promised, I think a couple of months ago, maybe to give you guys monthly updates. It will be a frequent, piece in our newsletters and different communications out to our families.
Okay, I just think like I'm definitely somebody that would go and click a link to read additional pieces of information in advance of a listening session, so I felt better equipped to go. I think that would be my concern. I haven't attended one yet, but that's how I would want to prepare for that meeting so that I know what to ask or just how to frame out, unless there's a different way that we should be thinking about that as a parent or as a community member.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you.
Then we get to hear from the new elementary principal, Ms. Rachel Schultz.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. A few familiar faces from when I was in the hot seat. Good to see you in this role. I would echo a lot of what Katie said. It has been so fun and exciting to get to know Delano. I'm not from here. I live in Monticello with my husband and 2 girls, but I've spent a lot of June and I foresee July as well coming up. I volunteered at the library for a couple hours today, and just getting to meet families and see the little kids so excited about reading is just, makes me feel like I'm in the right place for sure. And everybody has just been so kind and wanting to help, and meeting the families and getting to know the staff has just been wonderful. So I'm excited, and thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you. Next, we'll have Mary Reeder, Business Manager.
Short and sweet as usual. You are going to be approving the FY22 original budget this evening per statute. I did not update the revenue to reflect the increased state aid that just got approved. The biggest reason for that is because I want to actually see how many students we have in the fall. So we'll do a major revision at that point, and then it will be a true accurate knowing of what we have for revenue. So I just wanted to explain that. So you're not going to see anything different on the original budget today compared to really what you saw last May or at the May board meeting. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Then next on our agenda is an update from Eric Erlinson, our new Community Education Director, who's dialing in from Zoom. From space.
From the International Space Station.
Space Station, right.
That's right. Yes. I'm using the earpiece. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
We can hear you. Thank
Yes,
you.
we can.
Okay. And I, like a couple of our new principals, also not officially employed yet. I've been in district a couple days working on some transition with the outgoing director, and looking forward to get started. So we will. I'll start by sitting down with our team in community ed, making sure they have a clear understanding of who I am, and start putting our thoughts together on how we move forward, especially coming off of an interesting year where we have some dynamics that, when it comes to the revenue side and community education, we're going to have to be aware of, and are going to have to work through that process of what our programming is going to look like moving forward. So certainly, if there's any questions at this time, I'd fire away. I'm ready to take them. Otherwise, I am looking forward to getting started on officially on July 1st.
Thanks for the update. It's nice to see you again, and for the rest of the board to meet you.
Welcome.
Yes,
Also,
pleasure. Thank you.
Promised, Diane Johnson gave me a written report on an update of the community ed program. So I'm going to just share a few highlights, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. In general, first of all, she is reporting that we are happy to report that we are having a great summer with strong enrollment across all the programs. In our ECFE preschool and school readiness, all 5 ECFE classes this summer are running completely full. In our school readiness and summer preschool, the Magic School Bus extended summer school preschool pilot session via a grant from the state. It started in June 15th and runs through August 19th. We asked for 5 seats and have filled those 5 seats for a total of 112 hours of preschool instruction designed to catch children up before kindergarten. Any unused grant monies can roll forward next summer preschool programming. So they're making good use out of those dollars that are becoming available. On our public school, our Delano Public School preschool registration was updated. We opened that in February of this past year. They have room for more registrations in all sections currently. So still accepting registrations for preschool next year. Early childhood screening, the 2021-22 early childhood screening appointment schedule is ready and on our website with a link that takes you directly to the appointment schedule service link. They've completed all of the last screening dates. And so they're looking forward to any future folks that need to be screened for any reasons. They can come and make that online. The Tiger Kids Club summer has been off to a great start. They've been averaging about 140 kids a day. So they're getting back to normal numbers, which is great to see. Youth enhancement and recreation registrations were from June 1st through August 31st, and we have about 1,500 participants in all of those programs throughout the course of the summer. And this is all in recreation. Enrichment, we have about 460 registrants that are participating in those programs throughout the summer. Communication is always looking for new programming options. If you have any ideas, please contact community education so we can continue to expand our pieces. In aquatics, we have summer swim lessons that are underway. As of the second session, we no longer require a parent to be in the water. It's probably important to the parent to hear that. So was my son-in-law. Yeah, it wasn't good, but so they're pleased to have added variety of diving classes that have been taught through community ed this year. So that'll be good things for our diving, swim and diving team moving forward. The Tiger Activity Center, TAC memberships are on an uptick now that the face mask restriction has been lifted for vaccinated members. So we're still very diligent in making sure that we keep the weights and the circuit rooms clean and make sure that everybody can have a good, safe workout. And that concludes the community ed update.
Thank you. That concludes our reports from the administrative team. And once again, I know we mentioned this in the past, but I do want to make sure that we wish Mr. Vio and Ms. Johnson well in their retirement. So thanks again for all your years of service and enjoy retirement. All right, moving on. We've got board reports, starting with Masiko.
Yes, I attended Masiko. We've actually had 2 meetings since our last board meeting. We get a little off usually in the June and July, so we won't have a report next month, but we had 2 for this one. And really pretty standard. The big highlight that I want to share with the board is Janelle, our current executive director, was a finalist in the Painesville Area School Superintendent Search and has been accepted or has been offered and has accepted that role. So we will institute a hiring process to replace her as the executive director for the co-op. So things are moving fast. That I believe should hopefully have gotten posted today. Really looking for a fast turnaround to have somebody hired by our July meeting. So stay tuned on that, but we will have a change in leadership at the special education co-op.
Super, thank you.
Yep.
Next up is Right Tech Center.
I'll keep it short with the meetings being posted on there, or the minutes are posted, but we did our evaluation of Director Brian, who's basically like Superintendent Brian, basically, but one of the big things was we're really looking for a rebranding of Right Tech, just to try to get more information to kids about what it could mean to be in the trades versus, maybe going on a 4-year path. Income that goes along with a trade, next steps from Right Tech. Obviously, you don't go to Right Tech to go to college, but you go on to possibly a trade school, and just knowing the costs associated with that versus 4-year, just trying to really get information to kids that are unsure of the program to try to get more enrollment and just more information out there. So that was a big hit this last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Professional development.
I attended the last meeting for professional development, and the majority of it was discussed somewhat within the QComp presentation related to how they're looking at to develop their planning days for August and January. And also looking at the way they're refocusing on the efforts this year with what can be spread across all of the different buildings and how to have uniqueness where needed between elementary, intermediate, high school, and also pre-K. In addition to that, they also looked at what they're going to do with the budget that they have for planning for professional development days and how to best spread that between the different buildings.
Then schools for equity and education.
Yep, C met literally 3 days after our last meeting. They had Attorney Dan Schulman with the ACLU of Minnesota. And he talked about the Cruz Guzman segregation case. It's a case from 2015 that says Minnesota laws and rules have created a segregated school system that denies minority students an adequate education. They've been in mediation for 2 years, and that's resulted in House File 2471, which is dependent on the action of the legislature at this point. They were going to discuss what happened at the legislature, but obviously they weren't done with that yet. Optimistically, now we know, as Matt Shane had pointed out, that we're looking at 2.45% on year 1 and 2% on year 2. And then there was a lot of focus in this year's budget on recruiting teachers of color in their bills. And if Greg was here, he'd be really excited to know that the letters bill passed for teacher training for $3 million for kids with dyslexia.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. All right, so that concludes our board reports. We'll move on to new business. First item under new business tonight is to approve the elementary school handbook. I have a motion to approve the elementary school handbook.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Motion by Amy, second by Sue. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to approve the 2021-22 DIS student handbook. I have a motion to approve that handbook.
I can second.
Sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim and then Rachel. Motion by Jim, second by Rachel. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next up on the agenda is to approve the 21-22 DHS student handbook. I have a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
I'll go ahead and second. Motion by Corey, second by Lisa Siegwin. Any discussion on this one?
Can I start the discussion?
Absolutely.
And first, the backpack issue, I think it just wasn't fairly vetted. He didn't get the opportunity to meet with site-based like he spoke about. I watched Peter go through those hoops. I watched him sit there that morning for site-based and wait and email. And I think I contacted Jim and half of you guys to see who was in the committee and why he wasn't invited. So you never got the opportunity to address site-based. The other problem, and I've discussed this with the board, is the section in the handbook that says parents do not have a right to see their children at school. And I looked into it and I went back through my MSBA stuff. MSBA in your training says, never approve something you don't intend to enforce. And we can't enforce that because the Every Student Succeeds Act in section 1116 says parents have a right to be in the school. Not only do they have a right to be in the school, they have a right to be in the classroom observing their student. And so those two things in themselves are reasons that we should say, no, we need to take another look at this handbook and make sure that what we're putting out to the parents is what we plan to do, number one, and is legal.
Any other discussion?
I guess if there's, the difference between the backpack and the laptop bag, if that's gonna be a rule, then it needs to be stated somehow. I mean, that's gonna be a problem, right? You're just gonna say it's a laptop bag. It could be a backpack, just, I got my laptop in it, so it's a laptop bag.
I think
Maybe
it's,
some further language on the difference between that, maybe.
I was just say, I feel like it's evident tonight that we're not ready to pass. In my opinion, I'm not ready to pass that one. I just, there's too many questions and we need to have further discussion on that and allow that to happen.
I also thought at our last meeting, we talked about having that piece about it being legal reviewed. At the last one that we talked about that, and I'm not sure where, if that was researched or resolved or not, related to the parents' access to students. in
I think
school.
the parents, I don't, it is not my opinion that anything in the handbook is illegal.
But it does go against E ESSA section 1116 and 8101.
Okay, again, the recommendation with the handbook that we vetted through, we don't come to the conclusion that we're in violation of that.
But we can't tell parents they don't have a right to their students at school when it says in every Student Succeeds Act, which is a federal act that they do. Like that's, and I know we voiced this before, and the first time we talked about, you said we can have somebody look at it. The second time said, well, it'll be within reason. We don't want parents coming every day. And the more I thought about it, and I look back at, our training 1 and training 2, and the notes and stuff that I took, it said, don't ever approve something you don't intend to enforce. And we don't even intend to enforce it according to your comments and Barry's comments, the way it's stated. And so that's concerning. If we're gonna tell parents they don't have a right to access their students at school, number one, we better be sure that's true, and it's not. And number two, we better plan to enforce it.
So would you like to modify the amendment? Or the motion?
Propose them, yeah.
Propose a new motion, or we have a motion and a second on the table right now. We can move to a vote unless somebody would like to propose something different or modify.
And how you'd modify.
I don't have my cheat sheet on Robert's rules.
I don't know them at all, so.
If you want to amend the motion, you can propose to amend the motion for whatever that amended motion is, then the board will have to act on that amendment. Then the board, if that amendment does not pass, you go back to the original motion to approve the handbook, and you vote to approve the handbook. So you can vote to have an amendment to the motion. If the amendment to the motion passes, then you go back to the original motion and you would vote on the original motion with the approved amendment to the motion. If that made sense.
And then, so can you amend the handbook through a motion? Can you say
No, but you can,
amend the motion
to
to
approve
approve the
everything
handbook
with the exception of
with
those
the
two parts?
exception of.
That's what so I'm gonna ask that we amend the motion to approve the handbook with the exception of the section that says parents don't have a right to access their students and the backpack policy. Which actually isn't a policy in the back.
it's not a
policy, it's just that they're
It's a
removing it.
section it's a section in the handbook.
Yeah,
that
it's
you're
a
saying.
section in the handbook.
Right.
So how do
So
I,
you have to you want those together?
yeah. So approve the handbook with those two excluded.
So now you have a motion to amend the original motion. You need a second. And then have discussion.
Any discussion on that?
So by voting in favor of this amendment, I am voting to approve the handbook as long as the backpack section is removed and as long as the right to see my child is removed.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Well,
clarification.
in this particular, you're just approving the amendment to the original motion. You're not approving
Oh, to allow the amendment.
to allow the amendment to be part of the original motion.
Gotcha. Thank you, Matt, for that clarification. So there will be two votes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that's where I was confused. Thank you for that clarity.
Robert's rules are confusing.
Okay, so.
Go, Lisa.
Right, I earned my 10-year certificate tonight, apparently. So now we do a
Vote on the
vote on the
amendment.
amendments, right?
Correct.
All those in favor of the amended, the amended motion from Rachel, signify by saying aye.
All those in favor of the amendment, right?
Yes,
The amendment.
the amendment. In favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
5-2. Motion carries.
Is it too late for discussion on that? We're done?
No, now we have to,
We did the discussion on the amendment. We just voted.
but I have another.
Okay.
But now we're back now.
Now we're
This
back
is
to
the
original
original,
resolution. We still have to vote, or the original
I-
motion to vote on that.
which is weird since you two are the two that motioned and seconded something that you now voted against, but
Well,
okay.
I'm disappointed we coupled those two together because I agree, I would like to change the backpack thing. But I want to leave in there the parent thing because for my own reasons. That's my discussion. I don't know. I'm not
Are
sure.
you offering up an amendment?
I don't know if I am or not.
Well,
And I'm mainly not. I mainly just want more language about the backpack. Maybe I'm not even against, I just want more language stating why is one acceptable and the other isn't.
Well,
So-
I don't even know that we know that that's a fact. Maybe Barry wants to get up and speak, right? I think this was a couple of students who are interpreting something and they
Right.
had two things, but we haven't heard from Barry on any of this.
Yeah, I think the two backpacks that you saw are the one backpack and the laptop case. Neither one of those would actually be allowed under the language that's in the existing. I do think that the backpack that was shown is probably the smallest possible backpack that you could find and does not actually exist on many of our students. The laptop case thing is, it actually states that a laptop case or a Chromebook case is allowed such that the Chromebook is the only thing that fits in that case.
That's
So
that's
both of
my-
those examples would not be allowed.
That's when I think about a laptop sleeve, that's what I interpreted as literally a sleeve that you inserted. It's not a whole case, not a carrying case. So thank you for clarifying that. I had a hunch that the comparison of the items was potentially misleading or misinterpreted, I should say, but I don't know.
I think, I won't, unless you
I
have a
mean,
question.
feel free to, are there other topics that you can address?
Well, I
know-
think in terms of, the comparison of this past year with backpacks moving forward to next year, I think that there is an error, I believe, in correlating the two, and that the same rules that we have this year are going to automatically then move forward for next year. We do have a longer passing time next school year. There are more full classrooms because of all of the students that'll be back at one time. And one of the things that I think is potentially limiting is this school year, when the students were in place and we had all the social distancing fears and things like that, the teachers were not circulating around the classroom as frequently to assist students. And so there wasn't necessarily the same need for clear aisle space and those sorts of things. When teaching does return to normal and we do have full classrooms, I think that is going to be a legitimate concern shared by our staff throughout this very deliberate process. We've actually reviewed this handbook probably more so this past year, in preparation for our proposal to you all, more so than in any years, at least since the people I've talked to have been a part of the process. We had several conversations with staff about, hats and backpacks and those sorts of things. And as Peter indicated, the staff survey was pretty split, 54 to 46 or something like that in terms of the, staff's opinion on the backpacks. I do think that the space concern is a legitimate concern, given the number of students in the rooms, the lab equipment and things like that. And when the students in our experiences are bringing their backpacks, the one parent mentioned, well, it's the same amount of stuff. It's just in a backpack versus not a backpack. I don't think that that's an accurate statement, because generally speaking, the students that are bringing their backpacks, they're bringing the entire contents of their locker in their backpack. So it's actually not the same amount of stuff. I should also point out that the parent present at the school, you did just approve the DIS handbook, which that statement is in the DIS handbook as well.
Probably should have brought Barry up here maybe before we had that discussion, but.
Now I apologize for my lack of knowledge. Of that handbook, so.
But I think the genesis and what I was voting in support of, maybe was a little bit more in line with what Jenny brought up, is that it just feels like maybe there's some language that needs to be cleaned up within that and some further consideration.
And that's my thought. I think that the amount of people that we have here tonight who spoke on it and had concerns over it, and students showing up and having concerns over it, I am not saying one way or the other right now. I just don't think we have fully considered everything. I think I've learned new things from Barry tonight that we didn't know before. I think I learned new things from Peter that we didn't know before. We're just not ready to vote on, to say that it's ready to go. I think that it needs to be given more consideration.
Can we table the agenda item?
At this point,
Time
It
is a
would be
bit of
another
the, time
motion.
is a bit of the essence here. We normally approve the high school handbook in May. We did agree to hold until June, so we looked at all of the handbooks together. So you were able to work session and ask those questions. We're trying to work on the commonality of language and things that we can shore up. We know we're not there completely yet. We obviously have our two new principals too that are going to have to be part of that conversation in a much purposeful way. We talked about that during our work session at that time. I do believe, know this, there is no perfect handbook, okay? There isn't a handbook that speaks to every single situation that happens within a school. There is a tremendous amount of opportunities in our handbook for administrative interpretation for what makes sense and what is common sense. So to get down to every single speck of language in a handbook is going to be very difficult to meet every single situation that will arise in a school. That's been my experience as a principal for over 20 years. And it's been my experience working with principals over the last 10 years with regards to student handbooks. So again, that's why the handbook is reviewed annually. It is not just this is it and it is forever. It is reviewed and goes through an extensive process. I do concur with Mr. Voigt that this was probably more an extensive process than we've ever done in the past. And we'll continue to do this to make it better, but it's never going to be 100% perfect based on meeting the needs of every single student and staff member in a school, especially to the extent of the size of a 712 building.
and I think I certainly appreciate that sentiment, Matt, nor do I will ever want to spend this much time getting in the weeds of any handbooks and talking about prom and talking about this, that, and the other thing. I think I look at it as we went so many years with backpacks as a tool available to our students. Then we decided, okay, we are not going to do that anymore. And so, we certainly did that and worked through that. Then obviously the pandemic happened and we had to modify that for last year. And now we're seeing a tremendous amount of people, 400 students sign a petition. Staff did say, I think, yeah, okay, one way or the other, fine. I think it just warrants us to just think about it. I felt like we did table it in June under the understanding that the due diligence was going to have an opportunity to happen so that we could feel comfortable. And I could feel comfortable that that process played out. What I heard tonight is unfortunately the process didn't play out, and that's disappointing. But at the same time, I think that we have to listen to our constituents who are saying, like, we're not sure about this. That help us understand the reasoning behind making a decision. Are we just making a decision to have it in the handbook? Or do we really feel like this is the right decision to make? And I don't know that I'm there. I
guess I agree with everything that you're saying philosophically. It's hard for this particular decision because, again, I'm not that close to it. I'm not in the meetings. I'm not part of the conversations. But all the things that I heard Barry say tonight, I heard him say last month as well. And I think I'm also of the belief that those reasons were shared with staff and students and everybody who approached him and asked about it. So there's a part of me that just wonders if that they're still just trying to make their point be known, right? Which is their right to do. And whether they have listened to all the facts and are truly listening to both sides and they might not ever understand the positioning, right, of the teachers and the administration. They still disagree. And so they're trying to push it forward, which is fine. That's human nature, right? But I think if we honestly believe as a board member that, that administration is trying to push forward something that isn't in the best interest of the students and the staff, then that's one thing. If we think this is something else where it's two sides that really just are never really going to agree because they feel passionate about something and we may never please everybody, then that's a different issue altogether.
Right.
And
So
I don't,
think
like,
that's what I would say.
yeah, and I don't know that we'll ever please everybody. I really don't.
Right.
But it does sound to me from what we were presented this evening that both sides weren't given the fair opportunity to present what they wanted to present. I don't think that there's been the opportunity yet to even be like, hey, I didn't get what I want, because there were meetings set up that didn't happen and weren't allowed to happen. And so to me, that's different than, you know, the students having a voice and being allowed to go to the meeting and being told, no, we voted, this is where we're at. Then it's like, fine, okay, you know, we're kind of 50-50 vote. But because that didn't happen, now I'm in the position of, we didn't give the students the opportunity to have that voice. Right? So a special meeting had to be set up. It wasn't even all of site-based. So to me that, I don't know, there's something not quite jiving there.
Who sits on the high school site base?
Jim.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that Peter was going to be on that day. And the meeting was nearly over when Rachel found out that I was the one. And by then it was over. There was no time to invite him. So,
I'm just trying to think of, and I don't sit on site base anymore. No, I'm not saying that. I'm trying to think of when I sat on the elementary site base, that was one of the things I did as a board. So then I felt comfortable coming like that somebody from the board sat on the intermediate or had a voice in this. And then I like, okay, I get it. Like that's our role, right? So that we're not all in every single meeting and understanding this, and none of us want to micromanage this at this
some
level.
questions were asked, like, you know, this tripping hazard thing. Are teachers being injured in classrooms? But it's not that. It's.
Well, I thought the
Is it
original
about
reason.
safety? Are kids hiding things in their bags?
That's what I thought the original reason was why we went away from backpacks in the classroom was the safety concern around weapons and drugs.
Yes.
Is that,
That's what it was.
is that a
2 or 3
secondary
years ago.
concern or is that still the primary concern? Because that's different.
I think that is correct, that was the primary concern when they were banned several years ago.
Yeah.
I don't particularly share that belief.
Okay.
So a little backstory, when we were preparing in February and March to review the site-based or the handbook as a site-based team, I intentionally sought out student representatives to sit on site base during those discussions. Up until then, we have never had student representatives on site base. So we solicited some students from student council to sit on that and share their concerns. They did express some favoritism for backpacks among all the other changes that we did make. After the first conversation, we went and had department meetings with the various staff groups, followed up again to get more dialogue, basically back and forth on the various proposals. Brought that back to our site-based team in March for a kind of a final review. And in March is then when I first brought the handbook to you all. Obviously, Peter's participation in this process didn't happen as we would have liked, or it wasn't very fluent, but I don't think it's fair to say that there wasn't due process. I did meet with him according to his timeline, I think on May 7th or whatever. We had some conversations just to better understand sort of the rationale on both sides. I encouraged him to reach out to the site-based facilitator, which he had, of course, Ms. Hallblad. And then for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a miscommunication, whatever happened, he didn't get invited to that meeting, unfortunately. Recognizing that oversight, she then did send out an invitation to the entire staff. So Peter had an opportunity to speak to the entire staff. Yes, it was a voluntary meeting, 20 people of which showed up. I should mention our site-based team only has 6 people on it. So he actually had a wider audience than the vast majority of our site-based members. Following that, then we had the survey just to kind of figure out, you know, we'd already had a lot of these conversations. And then after staff had an opportunity to witness Peter's presentation, where do you stand now on the backpacks? That's the survey that yielded the 45-55 or whatever, you know, split. You know, if we're getting concerned about percentages, you know, it's roughly a 50-50% of the staff. Well, we're talking about 33% of the students that signed the petition. So I just, you know, want to make sure everybody understands kind of the process, and which I think was actually a fairly diligent review of our handbook.
Right, fair.
And I'm going to step in on that, Barry, and I mean, you're welcome to respond, but for Peter, who sat there and said the people making the decision are site-based. And he wasn't able to address site-based. He was able to address some teachers and paras and so forth, but never got the ability to answer the questions that you posed to him, the problems that you had, and he prepared a presentation addressing those concerns, such as the amount of things that are carried in the backpack. And I watched him go through this process and explain that, yes, students carry backpacks, but they're not going to carry their full day's stuff because they don't have to. So to assume that every student is going to carry a full day's worth of stuff when the pandemic is over is unreasonable. He addressed the issue of hallway crowding, which is where, as we know, most of our disciplinaries happen. And he said less kids will be in the hallway, right? Because they're not going to be crossing the building all the time. They'll be able to go to 2 or 3 classes. There was a lot of things that he was able to address in that meeting that he wasn't able to address to the site-based committee that made that decision. And when you presented tonight and you said they carry everything, not all students will be carrying backpacks. Not all students will be carrying everything they have. It's an organizational tool, and Pete's right, that we all use. We all use bags. We all use some kind of device to go back and forth with all of our stuff. And yet we're expecting kids in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade to do a better job of organizing and getting their stuff together and getting to class on time and being prepared than we expect of ourselves. The other issue that he was talking about is we're putting stuff in our bags, we're going to class, and you had responded and said, well, they can go back to their lockers and get stuff. Well, now they're missing class time. And one is definitely more valuable than the other. And so those were some of the issues that he was able to address to those 20 people that were present, but they weren't the 20 people that were making the decision. And he was really excited when he messaged me and Ms. Albleib accidentally gave him the wrong percentage and told him that it had passed the staff by 78%. He was super excited. And then she was wrong and it was a mistake. But then he was like, Mom, I'm still 10% of the staff, most of which didn't hear me, still voted in my favor. And he reached out again and nobody connected back with him and said, try again in 1 to 2 years. That was the response he got. And then he got a school newspaper that said the board's already passed it and said no backpacks. And so those things that as a 9th grader, he's trying to work through a process, which we encourage all of our parents to do. Go to the administration, work through it with them. He was unable to do. And I had told him the whole way through, if you work through this and the decision is no by site-based, you have to let it be at that, because that's what site-based does. But he wasn't able to go through that process and work with site-based. He wasn't able to be a part of the 3 people who made the final decision with you and Ms. Albright at the end. He was able to get a couple updates and that was it. And so he didn't get to interact in that way and help share his concerns and address your concerns. And so I think that's very different than saying Peter had access to the process or the students had access to the process. They didn't.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that. I mean, there were members of site-based that were a part of that staff meeting that Peter presented to. I don't know where the school newspaper came back saying that the board had already approved it. That certainly did not come from me. And ultimately, it was not just 3 people that made the decision. It wasn't Ms. Hallbleib, myself, and then one other person. The site-based committee had a follow-up meeting just to double check after Peter's presentation to say, well, this is where the staff sits. This is, the information that was shared. Do we change our previous recommendation, or was there sufficient evidence to go back and revisit that? And based on that conversation, there was not overwhelming evidence to suggest that we should come back with a different proposal. For the record, and I think I shared this 4 or 5 months ago, I actually originally proposed to allow students to wear backpacks. But as somebody who's not in the classroom, I really had to rely on the feedback that I got from the staff as to, why they should not be allowed. And so listening to their reasoning, and I think the site base as a whole, their arguments, I think, were more persuasive than allowing the backpacks. So I think we just need to trust the people that are in the classroom.
Thanks. All right, so we now have 2 motions on the table. One of which has, the amendment to the motion has passed. So now we have to vote on the original motion,
Unless somebody wants to introduce another amendment.
unless someone wants to introduce another motion.
Yeah.
Well,
I
if
don't
we
even
don't,
know.
that means then that the
You
two
know.
components are excluded from the approval and we're back next month.
Right, so.
They're excluded from the original and it passes with that, they have to delete that content is basically, right?
Right,
What I'm-
but if that doesn't pass, then we're in July.
So we need to go back to the original.
Correct. Because now the motion is the handbook with those two pieces missing. So
Correct.
if it does not pass, then there is no handbook and we're back in July.
Right.
Or if it passes, those two are missing. So that's either the way we move or somebody makes another amendment.
I guess I would like to make an amendment to add, to go back to the original, the handbook, the way that it's written at this point. I'm gonna try again after all the discussion that we've had. But the appetite is, I'd like to put a motion back on the table to go to the original handbook as it's written, with the understanding that this is an annual process and will be revisited every year, just like it is every year. Do I have a second for that? Okay.
I feel like we could at least vote on that. I will second that with the understanding that we put people in place to make these decisions and the handbook is, like you said, an annual thing. I second, are you saying?
I need a second for, in
go
order
back?
for it to do a vote, yeah.
Yes, I will second.
We have a motion by Seguin and a second by Gerke to propose the handbook be approved as originally written. Any discussion on that?
I think that's the right thing to do.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
5-2. Motion carries. Now,
Original motion.
now the original motion,
Yeah.
which is got this, that one approved. So the original motion is the original motion. I believe we have a motion by Seguin and a second by, or the other way around, motion by Corey, second by Seguin on that. Any more discussion?
Yes, sorry. So because I flip-flopped, I would just like to, my comment, I guess, is I think we need to really look at the parent piece, especially if we have that in multiple handbooks. So thank you for that clarification, Barry, because that is important, or we just need to have a review of that next year when we go into the handbook. And again, to Jim's point, site-based, please, I mean, every year they talk about the hats, they came to a nice little consensus on that. So can we next year please get to a better spot on the backpacks and better language on the backpacks?
Yeah, I agree. I think that we have, I guess the way I would look at it is that by voting no on the handbook, at this point, we're saying that we don't trust the process altogether. And I do trust the process. I think there's been a lot of missteps along the way and we've got, some new board members and, Barry being new, there's lots of things going on this year, right? So I do trust the process overall, but I think as any process, it can always be improved upon. So I think we just need to make sure that we look at this a little bit better next year.
I agree. Well said.
I think it's well said, but I want to say though, that even though I don't pass it, doesn't mean I don't trust the process. I absolutely do. And I respect the process. I think that in this case, there were, it just didn't work out, right? And so I think that was a missed opportunity. I'm by no means saying that I don't trust the process, nor do I respect it. I just think in this case, there were missteps, unfortunately, that led to this big discussion.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
I agree with Jen, and I think that as board members, it's our job to hear not only what the parents have to say, but what 400 of our students step forward to say.
Absolutely agree.
And so by voting no, it's not saying I don't trust the process, it's saying there's this piece in this handbook that the students are so passionate about that they've drugged this process out for a few months and they've come to us and asked us for help. And we need to really look at what are they asking? The original reason we took the backpacks away was for safety, because we were worried about weapons, and now that's not a concern. And so continuing to take something away for now a different reason doesn't make sense.
at all.
Yeah, and I agree. I am thankful for the students that came tonight. I'm thankful for the process they went through. I think we need to hear more from our students. I think we also have to look at the whole picture, right? And so there's a lot of things that our students want that unfortunately we're not always able to give them. And I think we try really hard to do the right thing. There's no perfect answer. The 400 people out of the, how many in the whole high school?
1,200.
1,200, right? It's a large number. It's not overwhelmingly significant, right? So I want to listen to them, and I think it's important that we keep listening to them, and I don't want to discourage students from, carrying this football as far as they have to do it. But we have to listen to everybody, including the teachers and the administration who are making this recommendation. So.
And that's why we are a site-based operating system.
Yes.
And this has to stay at the site-based level. This is not a board level decision. We should not be,
We should not be debating this as much.
the fact that we've spent this much time on this is absolutely not our role.
I agree. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Passes 5-2. Thanks, everybody. All right, next item on the agenda is to approve the resolution renewing Minnesota State High School League membership. This is an annual resolution. We talked about this last month in work session. Anything you want to add on this one? Mary?
You do it every
Pretty
year.
straightforward. We do this every year.
Same
Obviously,
thing.
we want to be part of the Minnesota State High School League.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Corey, second by Sue. Any discussion?
Just one clarification. Who's on this committee? Is it Corey and Rachel? Or who?
Just Corey, I'm the
Just
second.
Corey? Okay, couldn't remember. All right.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a resolution. Moving to a roll call vote.
We're just trying to move forward, Paul.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Now it passes. Thank you. All right, next item is to approve the original 21-22 budget. We will have Mary do a brief introduction tonight, but we've talked about this one already as well.
Yep, we looked at this last month. This is a little updated, just with some changes that came through with new staffing and whatever. And just as an FYI, if our enrollment comes through, as I had budgeted with the new dollar amount, the unassigned fund balance, right now we're looking at deficit spending 1.1 million. It would be a little under 1 million. So it'd be 998,000 or something. So that extra funding from the state relates to about 140,000 if our enrollment comes back.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clarification. I remember that number, but
if you're good with it.
Any questions for Mary? All right, do I have a motion to approve 21-22 budget?
I can make a motion.
Motion by Rachel. I'll go ahead and second by Sieglin. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is to, thanks, Mary. Next on the agenda is to approve the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance plan and the LTFM plan resolution.
Yep, so this, we also work session last month as well. So annual thing that we have to do for MDE to get our 10-year LTF or annual LTFM funding, but they want to see our 10-year plan showing we're, even if your deficit spend 1 year overall, at the end of the 10 years, you're still positive in that fund balance. So this is just an annual thing, and our projects did not change from what we originally shared in May.
Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Corey, second by Jenny, sorry. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is to approve the revised fiscal year 21 long-term facilities maintenance expenditure budget.
Yep, we actually decreased our last year budget that had been approved, and LTFM is just a little different. This is the only budget that we actually have to have approval from the board that we then send to MDE to get approval to either spend more or spend less. We're going to be spending a little less than you had originally budgeted. We had to move stuff around between different categories as well. So this is just all that money carries forward into future years. We didn't do as many site projects, parking lots and stuff like that as we had planned this year. So we'll just move that money forward. We won't be doing them again this year as well, just because they're doing stuff on the roadways. So we'll probably be looking at doing some of those projects in July of next year.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I have a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Amy, second by Jim. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to approve to hold an operating levy referendum on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This is around the timing of a potential referendum. We still need to gain consensus on what is actually going to be on the ballot in November, but this is just to basically approve the timing. So do I have a motion to approve? I'll go ahead and make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Seguin, second by Sue. Any discussion?
Can I start that one? 'Cause
Yeah.
Might as well. I have been very clear with the board. I'm going to vote no on the levy, not because we don't need it. I'm very clear that we need it. I want parents to understand that. Anybody who hears me talking to understand, I understand the need for the levy. It's the timing of the levy that's my issue. When I ran for board, I was clear that I would never vote for an off-year levy. This is an off-year election, so it's not about the need for the levy. It's about the timing that I'm voting no on.
That you're doing that tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just, to add to that as a counter, I think the primary reason that we're focusing on this year as our first opportunity to go to voters is because it's not an election year and we'll be able to really focus our voters on what's the important thing for the school. Political climate has gotten to the point where elections take up a lot of energy by a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of that going on next year. And I think it will be virtually impossible for the district to get a message across to our voters in terms of what we actually need and why, because of all the other noise that we're going to have. So I think we have the best chance of educating all of our voters if we go out this year, and everyone can vote. Just because it's an odd year election doesn't mean that not everybody in our district doesn't get the chance to go. And voting has probably never been easier than it is right now. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Passes 6-1. Next item on the agenda is to rescind policy 810, face covering policy, with the understanding that the district will continue to follow guidelines from above. Sorry, I pulled it away before I could finish reading it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. My laptop
I'd
died,
like to
so.
make that
I will
motion.
make the motion.
We all want a motion at once.
All right, we
I'll
have
second.
motion by Gerke, second by Black. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. To approve the first and only read of the following policies due to non-substantive and legal reference changes. Policy 704, development and maintenance of an inventory of fixed assets and fixed asset accounting system. Policy 706, acceptance of gifts. Do I have a motion to approve these policies?
Jenny, I'll make that motion.
Motion by Jenny, second by Rachel. All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Last item on the agenda is to approve the first read of policy 510.1, school activities fees, which is the new policy we discussed earlier.
I'd like to make that motion.
Motion by Black, second by Depa. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. It's the last item on the agenda. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I was thinking, I drove to wherever you were. I was thinking about that 15 minutes ago. Yes, I'm not kidding you, I was.
gonna be out of town. I bet you would pick
When you do those motions, we have lots of times to get in, I think I just threw it.
I saw on camera, we gotta shut down.
Right.